is Sharia investing profitable? That's the main question a lot of people ask. Whether if we put our money in conventional, whether we will make less when compared to Sharia assets. That's question number one. Question number two that I get quite regularly is whether Sharia compliant assets, whether it is suitable for retirement, right? And for your retirement planning, whether it is suitable for a person that wants to retire by the age of 55, or whether a person wants to retire at an early age, or whether the person is in the FIRE movement where it's financial independence, retire early, whether it's suitable for these groups of people, right? That's question number two. And question number three is how does one find Sharia assets over in Malaysia, right? But I think to start this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is Sharia, right? So Sharia, in a nutshell, is basically a way of life, right? Or it's a certain guidelines which actually guide a certain Muslim's day-to-day life, right? So when we talk a little bit about Sharia, example, right? When it comes to the way we eat food, right? As Muslims, number one, what kind of meat is halal and what kind of meat is not halal, right? So whether chicken is halal, right? It's already written in the Quran and also the Hadith. So over here, you have things like chicken, beef, whether it's halal, whether it's not halal, right? And the way it's slaughtered, right? And also what ingredients can be used for cooking, right? So the same way we have little guidelines, or we have guidelines from the food we eat, we also have guidelines with regards to investing, right? So with regards to Sharia investings, there are a couple of principles and also a couple of guidelines that we need to follow, right, in order for it to be a halal type of asset, right? So I guess, hey, thanks for the likes, thank you so very much. So I guess number one, right, we always have to remember as a stockholder or a shareholder. Please do write down any questions if you guys have any, right? So principle number one, as a stockholder, we always have to remember that we are basically buying a small share in a company, or we have a small ownership in that particular company, right? So when we have a small ownership of the company, we have to make sure that the company does things which are Sharia compliant, or rather the income derived from the company is halal, right? And I think I'll give you a couple of examples on what makes something halal and what makes something not so halal, right? So these are the basic guidelines, right? So number one is with regards to this particular, I guess, framework or particular item, right? Which is garar, right? Garar is basically uncertain, right? If we are uncertain of a particular transaction, right, or if we are uncertain of what we are buying, it's haram, right? Let me give you an example. Assuming right now, if we are buying a plant, right, or assuming right now we are buying some plants lah, basically, right, and it does not have any flowers, right? And we ask the vendor, we says, okay, can I buy, say, a sunflower, right? But we don't see any flowers, right? And the vendor actually gives us a little plant, right? So from over there, we are not sure whether sunflowers will come out. We will never know if roses will come out or maybe a bunch of fruits will come out, right? So these are transactions which are uncertain. Another example for this is assuming if we want to, maybe there is I guess there is this animal which is unborn yet lah, basically, right? And we say, hey, I booked this particular animal lah, okay? Maybe it's a camel, right? Maybe you want a female camel, right? And then after that you say, hey, I want a book lah, and turns out what happens if it's a male camel, then, that's the uncertain, I guess, the uncertain element lah, basically, right? So that's number one. Number two, which makes a transaction or makes a business not halal lah, basically, is maisir, right? And maisir is basically if they were to make money via gambling, right? And I think I'd like to give an example over here lah, right? A lot of institutional funds. I'll give you a very I guess in the industry kind of example over in Malaysia, right? Okay, with regards to gambling. I'm sure sometimes they were many, many years ago when I was a kid, right? I still remembered looking at stocks like Genting Highlands or Berjaya Toto, right? And at that point in time, right, Genting Highlands and Berjaya Toto, right, they used to pay dividends of between 8 to 9%. It was really, really good dividends, right? And I always ask myself, right? And I remember working for a fund management company, right? As a junior analyst. And I used to ask my fund managers, and sometimes, it's easy to forget, right? So I will ask my fund managers, oh, when I do a filter, right? And I look for stocks which give good dividends, right? A lot of times I'll see things like Genting Highlands and so Berjaya Toto, right? And I will ask my fund manager, why don't we buy this? I just can't remember sometimes, right? And this is the main reason why, right? The whole thing of it all is not halal, lah, basically, right? So my fund manager is not comfortable buying this, right? So assuming right now, if you look at the big institutional funds, your EPF, your PNB, your QAP, your Kazana, right? You notice that a lot of these big funds, they do not have any holdings in non-Sharia companies. Let me repeat that again. A lot of these big funds do not have any holdings in non-Sharia stocks, right? So when this happens, basically, these stocks will not be that, the demand for these stocks won't be that high. And when the demand for these stocks are not high, the price will be quite low, lah. Basically, when the price is quite low, then you get better dividend yields. Let me repeat this again. This is very important, right? When there is a low demand for certain non-Sharia stocks, right? So the prices would be low, lah. Basically, you have to look at supply and demand, right? When the prices are low for these stocks, what will happen is that basically it's an inverse relationship between if the price is low, your dividend yields will go up, right? So that's one of the reasons why, if you notice the better paying the better dividend yielding stocks tend to be the non-Sharia type of stocks, lah, right? So I'm just giving you some, insight, lah, right? And the last bit, right, that makes a stock non-Sharia is stocks which are riba, right? Or companies which deal with riba, right? And this will be things like banks, right? For example, right? And also your insurance type companies, right? And let me explain to you how riba works, or how these companies work, lah, right? Basically, when a bank receives deposit, right, they will give us CASA, right? Or it's called the current account savings account, CASA, right? So normally, if we put money in the bank, right, we be lucky lah if we get some returns lah, right? Sometimes they'll give about 1%, sometimes they give about 2%, right? But what a lot of banks do, right, once they get the money from depositors, they will lend out that money, right? And they will lend out in the form of housing loans. They will lend out in a form of car loans. They will lend out in the form of credit card. And I'm sure a lot of you guys will know lah, credit card interest rates can be as high as 1% per month. 1% per month. I've heard certain credit cards charging 14% per annum. So imagine if a depositor puts the money in the bank, right? They get interest of about 2%, right, from their deposits, right? That said, if the bank actually lends out their money and they make about 14%, it's basically a spread of 14 minus 2. You get a spread of 12%. And that is one of the reasons why banks are very, very profitable, right? So these are the three types of stocks which are not Sharia compliant. Right now, I'm just going to ask the crowd, right? I'm just going to look at the chats, right? Let me click live chats, right? So for instance, right, if any of you guys are watching this in a later date, right, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, right? Number one, to test your understanding, is a plantation stock Sharia or not? Right? Basically, it's a Sharia type of stocks. Why? They're not. There's nothing. If you remember the three principles I shared with you, plantation stocks. What they get, the income that they get, is Sharia lah, or the type of business is Sharia type of business or Sharia compliant, right? The next things, hospital, is it Sharia or not? Right? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think. Basically, hospitals also, when they earn an income, right, is Sharia compliant lah, basically, right? And I guess the third one, right? This one is a tricky one, right? Property holding companies, are they Sharia or not? Right? I remember actually asking this question before when a couple of REITs were doing their roadshow, right? I was asking, I said, this building, right? Sometimes if they rent a mall, right, it could be 90% of their tenants, they do Sharia compliant activities, right? But sometimes, some shops will probably sell things which maybe I guess haram meats, right? Or they have like a little supermarket which actually sells haram meat or things which are not permissible, right? So will that still be halal or not, right? So basically, let me show you some guidelines where I guess the Securities Commission has came out with. So to give more, I guess, to actually give more light, right, on what is halal and what is not, right? So it's basically a percentage of income. If the percentage of income from the non-halal activities are high, what will happen is that Sharia stocks will become non-Sharia. So that's one of the reasons why you can actually see certain stocks, they may be Sharia for a long time, and then all of a sudden, they just turn non-Sharia or they turn conventional, right? And I'm sure some of you are asking, says, hey, how did a Sharia stock become non-Sharia? Or how did a Sharia stock become conventional stock, right? Sometimes it's the percentage of revenue earned on certain income streams, right? So let me just give you a quick rundown. Let me just scoot to the PC. Let me show you guys. Okay, let me just put it as presentation mode, right? Okay, so over here we can see what is a Sharia stock, right? So there is a 5% benchmark rule where if a company earns income via conventional banking, conventional insurance, when it comes to as I mentioned, gambling or non-halal items, right, like your pork and whatnot, right? If they earn that kind of income, right, or also even I guess non-compliant entertainment, right? If they earn above 5%, is also non-Sharia, right? So yeah, that's the first test, right? And the second test is a 20% benchmark, right? This would be things like stockbroking, number one. Number two would be things like rental activities from non-Sharia activities, and the final one would be things which are non-Sharia lah, basically lah. So these are the basic benchmarks in when it comes to the income earned, right? So let me just sorry about that. Let me scoot here. So yeah, basically these are certain stocks which are Sharia and non-Sharia, right? So from here we can see the principles. Right now is a matter of the percentage income earned from the type of businesses, right? If the business is if they owe, as I mentioned, like a building, right, a whole building, right, 90% or 95% could be earning Sharia or things which are in compliance with Sharia, right? If 5%, a small percentage actually comes from non-Sharia activities, you have to look at the benchmark and see whether it's Sharia compliant or not, right? So right now, let me show you some Sharia compliant stocks and also some Sharia compliant ETFs, right? Let's study whether we can make money, and most importantly, whether they can outperform conventional type assets, right? So number one, in order for you to find Sharia type stocks, right? One of the best places is actually going to the Bursa marketplace, right? I think you can see over here, there's this sign of the crescent, right? Which actually shows that it's Sharia compliant, right? So over here, right, Genting, as we know, is I guess they do I guess gambling activities, right? But what if Genting Plantation actually, or what if Genting actually owns a plantation company, right? As I mentioned a while ago, right, the income will come from the plantation, right? So we can see that it's a Sharia stock, right? So that's number one. Number two, with regards to airlines, right? Whether it's Sharia or not, right? Some airlines they can serve certain things which are non-Sharia, right? Maybe it's a certain meats or maybe it's some certain beverages, right? So to check whether the company is Sharia or not, as I mentioned, like companies like AirAsia X, we can see that they are Sharia compliant over here as I guess as guided by the Bursa marketplace. The third, right? I think this one I've already spoken about this many times, right? And I found out myself, right, that this stock, Magma, which is Impiana, right, is a hotel stock, right? Initially, I thought it was Sharia compliant, but I found out while doing research on this episode that this stock is a non-Sharia stock, right? And over here we can see KLCC Properties, right? This is a REIT, right? And this is a Sharia. We can see it's Sharia compliant, right? And as we know, in malls, right, certain places could be Sharia compliant and certain places could not be Sharia compliant. But over here we can see that KLCC is a Sharia compliant stock. So the next question is whether we can make stocks or we can make money via Sharia compliant assets, right? So let me show you one particular asset which will blow everyone's mind, lah, right? I think number one is this particular stock, right? It was 26 cents just 1 year ago. Right now it's about 120. Look at it fly. You can actually 5 times your money in just 1 year, right? And this is a Sharia type stock, right? Second is KLCC's staple group lah. This is the REITs. The next question is whether we can actually buy Sharia assets for us to retire. We can see that there are two things, right? Number one, it gives about a 5%, 5% capital gain. On top of that, you get 5% dividend yields, right? Overall, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, this one, if we were to compare it, it's comparable with a lot of assets which are out there, right? So, and as we know, KLCC is a relatively strong retail mall in Malaysia, right? And KLCC is still, I guess, a certain landmark, right? So if you want to invest in KLCC or you want to be part owner of KLCC, right? You may want to consider this particular thing. You get dividend yields of about 5%, right? And also you get your capital gains of about 5%, right? So I think overall, right, I'm going to answer this question, right? Is Sharia investing much better than conventional investing, right? Whether whether we can make money via Sharia investing, right? Honestly, the answer is a resounding yes. We already done a couple of benchmarking tests, right? And one of the things that we found out is number one, Sharia compliant stocks, right? Especially in Malaysia, if it's a Sharia compliant stock, you have a bigger pool of buyers, right? As I mentioned to you, certain investment funds like your EPFs, your PNB, right? They are more comfortable buying Sharia type stocks. So therefore, if you get big institutional investors buying into Sharia companies, right, or Sharia compliant stocks, right, what will happen is that you will have a natural push in the stock price, right? So that's number one. Number two, why Sharia stocks tend to perform better than conventional stocks, especially in Malaysia, is this, right? Is basically when we do back testing, right? We found out that Sharia type investments or Sharia type companies, right? They are perceived as safer. As I mentioned to you, there's this particular term called gara, right? Or uncertainty, right? So if people do business with a lot of uncertain terms, right? It's hard. Okay, so remember what happened during the US, the housing bubble crash, right? One of the reasons why is that a lot of people use options, right? And options is considered option contracts is considered like a gara is uncertain lah, basically, right? So when things drop, right, it will really drop, right? So it's considered as, or it's perceived as safer assets, right? So I think all in all, right, what I'm trying to say is Sharia investing is number one, safer, right? Number two, you can actually, there is also an upwards bias where you can actually see big institutional funds actually move inside. And the third is like there has a big pool, right? If you have a conventional or you have a stock which is not halal, right? You have less pool of buyers. So therefore, the supply demand lah, the dynamics lah, right? So I think all in all lah, the big question is Sharia investing should we even consider Sharia investing, especially when it comes to our retirements, right? For me, definitely yes lah, because I think number one, I'm Muslim, right? And number two is yeah, we want to actually make sure that our what we earn is halal, right? So I think definitely since there is the Sharia financial industry has been growing and growing and growing, and right now we can see a lot of Sharia compliant assets out in the market, right? I think, and also the third thing is Sharia assets are making money, right? I think why not, right? I definitely, if you guys are looking towards Sharia assets, definitely look into Sharia stocks. Oh, and finally, I before I forget, in terms of Sharia type ETFs, right? What Sharia type ETFs am I looking at this point in time? Just let me show you this particular ETF. So this particular ETF is Wahid FTSE Sharia. The ticker symbol is HLAL, right? And we can see that within 1 year, this particular ETF managed to appreciate by 24%, right? Again, right, I have to stress over here, right, over and over again, right? It's not the asset which actually makes the money, right? Or it's not what we found through back testing is that is the skill of the fund manager, or it's the type of assets that we buy, right? Sometimes even though is a Sharia type assets, but if the company that we are buying are weak companies, then the portfolio will not do well. All in all, what I'm trying to say is all about stock selection. If you have a good stock pick process and you pick good stocks, right, you definitely see, I guess, better returns from your portfolio, right? But if you pick bad stocks, right, and even though it's Sharia, right, it will not help, right? So as I mentioned again and again, it's all about stock picking. And how do you pick a good stock? Basically, always keep this in mind. If you buy a stock, you're basically buying a share. And if you buy a share, always remember that you should invest in companies that are making money, right? And I think, as you guys can see, right, why did UEM Sunrise increase in just 1 year? And how it almost increased by maybe 4 to 5x, 4 to 5x. So basically, you put 1,000 ringgit, right? If it went up by 4.5x, you already get 4,500, And the whole thing of it all is that, as I mentioned, is a business, right? And right now, what's happening in Johor, right? There's a special economic zone which is happening over in Johor, right? And when there's, I guess, increased relationship between Johor and Singapore, when they build the LRT between Johor and Singapore, what will happen is that a lot of people are actually looking towards Johor, towards buying their land, right? And once the LRT comes up, it makes it easy for people to move between Johor to Singapore.